Bonjour, welcome to Wahsa Distance Education Center's radio Zoom classes. This is MEL3E, Grade 11 Workplace Math, and I am Bronwyn Slade. If you'd like to participate live today, you're welcome to call the Wahsa studio at 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017. You can listen on the radio at 91.9 FM or on the television at Bell Express View Channel 972. You are also always welcome to join me live through the Zoom link, which is available from me, your teacher, and also from your DEC. Our classes are scheduled on Monday through Thursday from 9 to 10 in the morning, and we are in week 3 of our 9-week course. A reminder of what work to submit once you're ready to submit work for grading. The support questions, the ones marked with the pencil icon, are not for marking, they're practice problems. So you decide which ones and how many to do. If you're understanding a concept, feel free to skip questions, that's totally fine. If you need more practice, let me know, and I can send you more practice. The questions marked with the key questions, are the ones to submit with to be graded. So please do all of those questions, showing all of your work, all of your steps, your thinking. This way I can give you credit for all of your understanding. And also I can understand if you're struggling with something. I can understand what you're struggling with more likely if you give me more information. There are 3 methods to submit your work for marking. The first is to scan your work and send it in electronically. So scan your completed work into using a smartphone. You can use the iPhone Notes app or the Android Google Drive app. Both have scan functions. If you can't scan, you don't have a smartphone, you can just take pictures, that's fine too. The scanning is just a smaller file, so it's easier to send. Then you can either email it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca or CC it to bronwyn.slate@nnec.on.ca. Or you can also send it to me through Facebook Messenger at bslatewahsa. The second method is to drop your work off in Sioux Lookout. We have an outdoor mailbox at our location 74 Front Street. We're the bright red building next to the post office, and we have a small white mailbox next to our side entrance that you can just put your work in there. And then the third method is to hand your work into your DEC. So your DEC can either send your work through the Express or fax it to 807-737-1732 or toll-free fax to 1-800-463-7852. You can connect with me through social media. You can either, both on my Facebook and my YouTube channel are under the name bslatewahsa, so you can find me there. All of our classes are recorded and then uploaded to YouTube shortly after airing, so that's a great place to access them if you haven't been able to see them live, or if you just want to watch the replay and pause things, slow things down. That's just a really good way to re-access our class. There's also short videos explaining common errors and confusing concepts on my YouTube channel, so if you're struggling with something, that can be a good place to go and check out first in case I've already addressed it, and maybe there's something there that can help you, that you can access at any time. Math is a really visual subject, so I would strongly encourage you to watch the YouTube videos. It's going to set you up for the most success. So if you can't join us live through Zoom and you can't access the YouTube videos because you don't have reliable internet, let me know and I can send you a USB key or something that has the recordings on them so you can still access the visuals. Alright, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to me. This is why I'm here. Email is one of the best ways to get a hold of me. My email address is bronwyn.slate, which is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. My Facebook is another great way to get a hold of me. You can find me at bslatewahsa. You can call me at the office at 807-737-1488, extension 2209. Or you can call toll-free, 1-800-667-3703. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 till 4. However, I do teach from 9 to 10 and from 3 to 4, so those times I won't be available if you're calling me. All right, we are on to lesson 7, which is simple interest. So our learning goals for today are that at the end of this course, you will be able to calculate simple interest, and you will understand the key elements when calculating simple interest. So you know that you have met those learning goals because you can say, I can use the formula I equals PRT to calculate simple interest. 2, I can explain the significance of constant growth to simple interest. And 3, I can explain the details of interest rates and time periods in terms of simple interest. Alright, so let's activate our brain and do some mental math. I'm not a believer of math mad minutes. I don't think that drilling and killing arithmetic facts really helps us understand anything or learn anything. If you can memorize them, great. But if you can't, it doesn't give you any skills or tools. So we work on developing strategies that are transferable and apply into various situations so that you can use them whenever you need them, using friendly numbers. So today's question is 6 times 8, and we're breaking these factors into smaller factors. So factors are 2 numbers that multiply together to become a product, and this is one that I definitely was told to memorize, but I wasn't given any skills, and it was one of the harder ones that I struggled with when I was learning my multiplication facts. But, so if we use the idea of breaking numbers into smaller factors, so what that means I can do is I can say, okay, well, 6 is 2 times 3, so then if I times that by 8, so maybe I know that 3 times 8 is 24. And so then if then if I do 2 times 24, that's 48. And so, because of how multiplication works, we can multiply in different chunks. It's still going to get us the same answer. So that's one way to get 48, which is what 6 times 8 is equal to. But we also could break up 8 into 2 factors. So we could say that 8 is 4 times 2. So then maybe we know that 6 times 4 is 24, and then times that by 2, and that's 48. So that's another way that we could have done it. Or we could have done, still breaking 8 into 4 times 2, but we could do 6 times 2, and then times 4. So 6 times 2 is 12, and then times 4 is 48. So again, we still get to the same place. So this way, like I was saying with drilling and killing of your multiplication facts, I wasn't ever taught any strategy. So if I didn't know 6 times 8, I just didn't know 6 times 8. There wasn't anything else I could do. But this way, if I knew my 2 times tables or my 3 times tables or my 4 times tables, I could break up my 6 and my 8 into ones that were easier for me to do, and then maybe I could get to the answer. We could even go completely one more method. We could break them all up, which can be really useful sometimes. So I could do, 6 times is 2 times 3, and 8 is 2 times 4, and then maybe I know so then I can rearrange and say, okay, well maybe I know that 2 times 2 is 4, and 3 times 4 is 12, and then I get to 48. Or you can rearrange them in ways that maybe, like, you can break them up into different ways that make it easier for you to do it, and you get to decide whatever way makes the most sense for you. So that's a really useful strategy. Okay, mine's on. Let's engage in prior learning. What do we need to know for this simple interest lesson? So we need to know what makes a year. So what I mean by that is that year is equal to 12 months, which is equal to 52 weeks, which is equal to 365 days. So when we're talking about money and interest, when we're calculating interest, we need to know these, how we break up time, because sometimes that's relevant to whatever it is that we're calculating. So it's just important to remember that 1 year is equal to 12 months, and it's equal to 52 weeks, and equals to 365 days. We ignore leap years, so we always do 365 days, even though every 4 years we have 366 days. We ignore that for the sake of money. We just say 365 days is how many days are in a year. Okay, so that's what we need to hold on to for later on. All right, let's explore some new concepts today. So when will I use this in real life? Well, we are developing skills to attack problems. Money is something that shows up in our life all the time, and it's really important to be able to figure out, make decisions, figure out what you need to figure out based on information. And so we need those skills to problem solve, to break questions down, to figure out what information we know and what information we don't know, what information we need. So that's what we're working on, is developing those problem solving skills. Okay, so first we have to talk about what is interest to make sure that we're all talking about the same idea. So this is on page 15 of your IELTS booklet. And so we're borrowing money is what we're talking about generally when we're talking about interest. It could be lending money, but most often it's borrowing money. So when you deposit money into the bank account, your bank account, you technically are lending your money to the bank. And the bank gives you money for borrowing your money. So if you put your money into a savings account, they give you interest for being able to borrow your money. Other accounts are different. A checking account doesn't work in the same way, but that's generally what's going on. So in the opposite way, when you get a loan, the bank is lending you money. And so the bank charges you a fee, charges you interest for lending you money. So either money earned or money paid for the use of money is called interest. So GICs, RRSPs, savings accounts are all investments. So they're all you lending your money out and investing your money, meaning that you're going to get interest. You're going to get paid for that. Whereas when you get a credit card, or a payday loan, things like that, those are all lenders. They're all lending you money, so you pay them interest for being able to borrow the money. There are different ways that interest can be calculated, and we're going to be looking at two of them. Today we're going to be looking at simple interest, and then later on we're going to be looking at another method. All right, so when you're calculating interest, it depends on 3 different factors. So the amount of money invested or borrowed is called the principal, and we use the capital P as our variable. Then the annual, which means yearly interest rate, is always expressed as a decimal. So even though in the questions it also is going to show up as a percent, but we're going to express it as a decimal when we're doing our calculations, and we use R for rate as our variable. And then the time for which the money is invested or borrowed, and this is always expressed in years for simple interest, and we use T, small t, as our variable. So the formula for simple interest is interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. So how much you invest times your interest rate times how long you invested for. So that we shorten to I equals PRT. When we just put letters next to each other, we're multiplying. We don't put the multiplication symbol in when we're using variables. Okay, so let's look at this a little bit more. So we're going to complete the following table to show the growth of an investment earning 10% simple interest each year. So we're going to do it for each year. So it's just going to be 1 year, but we're going to show it for each of these. So we're going to, the balance at the beginning of the year, we're going to say $1,000. So the balance, so year 1, the balance at the beginning of the year was $1,000. The balance that interest is calculated on, so that's how much we're investing, is $1,000. That's how much we're starting with. So the interest earned, so it's 10%. So how we figure out how much interest is earned is we say $1,000 times 10%, which is 0.10. And then we're just doing it for 1 year, so it's just times by 1. So 10% of 1,000, you can, if you wanted to use your calculator, you can. And you would do 1,000 times 0.1 times 1 is equal to 100. So the interest earned is $100. So the end of the year balance is 1,000 plus 100, because you earned that $100 interest. So then in year 2, the beginning of the year balance is $1,100, right? We're starting year 2 with more money. The balance that the interest is calculated on is always the amount that we started with. For simple interest, we are always calculating our interest based on the first amount that we had. So the interest earned is $1,000 times 10%, so 0.10 times 1, because we're just talking about 1 year. So it's still $100. You make $100 investment in that year. So the end of the year balance for that year is $1,200, because you made $100 that year, add it to what you had before. This is assuming that you're, like, this is just an investment, so you're not spending it. It's just how the money is growing. So at the beginning of year 3, we have $1,200. The balance that we're calculating interest on is still $1,000. It's still the same amount. So for simple interest, these middle parts are all the same. So 1,000 times 10% times 1 year is $100. So the end of the year balance is $1,300. So at the beginning of year 4 is $1,300. The interest that you're calculating it on is still $1,000. For simple interest, that never changes. So to calculate the year, that year's interest is 1,000 times 10%, which is 100, which is $1,400 total at the end of the year. And then year 5 is 1,400 is the starting amount. 1,000 is how much you're earning your interest on. So 10% of 1,000 for this last year is still $100. So we have $1,500 is how much we have at the end of the year. And so that's how you can see how interest grows over, with simple interest, over a course of years. So it's important to notice that interest is calculated, interest is calculated only on the, it's only earned or calculated on the original amount invested or borrowed. So that's really important. Simple interest, that's the key point, is that it's only on how much you start with. Okay, so now we just need a bit of a reminder. So interest rates are percents, and we need to remember how to convert percentages. We've done this before, but just a reminder. So remember that percent comes from the Latin by 100, so we're dividing the percent by 100. Dividing the number by 100 is what percent means. So, for example, if we have 7%, we do 7 divided by 100, which is 0.07. Many of us learned that, many of us learned when we, in elementary school, that when we're dividing something by 100, we just move the decimal place. So the number is right after, the decimal point is right after the number. And then because we have 2 zeros, we move it over 2 spaces. And then that means that we need to put a 0 there in order to, and we always put a 0 at the beginning. That's how many folks think about in terms of converting a percentage to a decimal. So you can totally think about it like that. What you're technically doing is dividing by 100. So the same with 12% is 12 divided by 100. So the same thing here. If you're going to do your 12 with your decimal point, then you're going to move it over 2 places because there's 2 zeros. So then that's how you end up with 0.12. when you might have a fraction in your percentage in your interest rate. So it could be 1.25%, which 1/4 is 0.25. So you're going to change it into a decimal first. So you could do, to figure out that decimal, you do 1 divided by 4 to figure out your decimal. That's going to be 0.25. So 1 1/4 is 1.25. And then you divide all of that by 100. 3.5 is the same. So 3.5 you put into a decimal, so 3.5 divided by 100 equals 0.035. 24 3/4 is 24.75. Divided by 100 is 0.2475. And 19.83% is equal to 19.83 divided by 100, so 0.1983. One that I did include, which generally doesn't come up when we're talking about interest, but just to note it, is that if we have like 250%, so that means that we do 250 divided by 100, which is going to equal to 2.5. 0 if you want the 0. So sometimes if you have a percentage that's greater than 100%, you're going to end up with a decimal that is greater than 1. All of these examples that I have all have 0 or all less than 0. That's generally what's going to happen with a percentage. We're going to be less than 100%, but you could in theory have something that is bigger than 100%, which means that when you divide it by 100, you end up with something, a number other than 0 in front of the decimal. Just something to remember. Okay, so your support questions on page 16, question number 1, just is a refresher on how to do conversions of percentages. So that's important as we go through. So then the other thing that we need to remember is how to break down time. So T in simple interest, T, it must be represented in years. T always means the total number of years in simple interest. But sometimes we don't have full years. So we need to convert. So what that means is that if we, remembering that 12 months equals 1 year, so if we're investing or borrowing for example, 21 months, that means we need to figure out how many years 21 months is. So we do 21 divided by 12, because 12 is the number of months. And so 21 divided by 12 is equal to 1.75. So that means that 21 months is equal to 1.75 years is what we need for our calculation. It has to be in years. So similarly, remember that 52 weeks is equal to 1 year. So if we have 45 weeks, then we need to do 45, the number of weeks that we have, divided by the total number of weeks in a year. And that equals, so 45 divided by 52 is equal to 0.87 years. Is how many 45 weeks is 0.87 years. So it's less than 1 year because 45 weeks is less than 52 weeks. So it makes sense that it's 0 point something because it's less than a year. And then 35 days is equal to 1 year. So if we had 550 days, then we would do 550 divided by 365 because that's how many days are in a year. And that is equal to 1.5 years. So again, you always have to have your time in years. So it's really important that if you have a situation where you're not talking about years already, that you need to convert your months, your weeks, or your days into years. So let's practice that a little bit. So here, we're going to convert 15 months, 21 months, 6 months, and 3 months into years. So we're talking about months, so 12 months, just a reminder, equals 1 year. So we're going to do 15 divided by 12 is equal to, and we can use our calculator. 15 divided by 12 is equal to 1.25 years. 21 divided by 12, we just did this one, 1.75 years. 6 divided by 12 is equal to 0.5. 6 is half of 12, so that's half a year. And 3 divided by 12 is equal to a quarter, 0.25 years. Again, if you did that on a calculator, you'd get the same thing. If we were doing the same idea, if we were doing weeks instead, if we said that this was 6 weeks, so there are 52 weeks in 1 year, so we would do 6 divided by 52. I don't know what 6 divided by 52 is in my head. So 6 divided by 52 is equal to 0.115. 0.115 years. Or if we were doing the same thing, if we were picking days, if we were doing 21 days, so there are 365 days in 1 year, so we do 21 divided by 365. Also not something I know in my head. So 21 divided by 365 is equal to 0.058. So these are very small amount of years. Most likely we're not going to do that in terms of investing money, but you could do it. It's still, this conversion is still the same. Okay, so now you can do the support questions on page 17. Question number 2 are working on practicing that conversion of time. Okay, so now we're going to put it all together. So calculating simple interest earned. So instead of using a table, we're going to use a formula. This is on page 18 of your IELTS book. So remember that I equals PRT is our formula, and you are going to be able to look this up. You're not going to have to memorize this when you do your culminating activity, when you do your final project. It's going to be open book. You're going to be able to look stuff up, so you don't have to memorize this. It's okay if you don't have it memorized. But just remember that when it's I equals PRT, remember that that means that we are multiplying in between those letters. So that's just really important to remember. I won't write the multiplication symbol, so you just need to remember that that's what's there. So I is your interest earned. That's what we're calculating in dollars. And P is your principal invested in dollars. So the money that you start with, or the money that you borrowed if you're talking about your borrowing. R is your interest rate in years, expressed as a decimal. And T is your time in years, like we were just practicing. One thing that I forgot to write down here is that if you want to figure out the total amount of money that you have, like we did in your, so A is your total amount at the end, and that is equal to I, the interest earned, plus your principal. Just a reminder of that. Okay, so let's do some. So find your simple interest, so how much interest you're making, and the amount, how your total amount at the end. So we have our principal is, so how I like to do this is I like to write my variables out. Here I have it written out pretty clearly, but often you're going to have like a word problem or something where you have to extract the information. So I like to write my variables out so that I know what my variables are. So P is equal to 640. R is equal to 12.5%. And so I'm going to change that to 0.125 because that's what I'm going to be using in my calculation. And my time is equal to 13 years. It's already in years, so that's just going to be 13. So then I is equal to PRT. So that means that it's equal to 640 times 0.125 times 13. When I have numbers, I put it in brackets. It's just mathematical. I could put the time symbol, but I just put it in brackets because that's what I'm used to doing. It's the same thing. The brackets next to each other means that we're multiplying. So then to do that on your calculator, you're going to do 640 times 0.125 times 13. And that equals $1,040. So when we did this before, remember we just did it for 1 year. But what we've done now this time is we've done it for all 13 years at the same time. So this is the total amount of interest that you earn over the 13 years. Whereas before, when we were using the chart, we were doing it per year. So that's just important to remember why it's so big. It's because it's all 13 years. But then to figure out how much money we have in total, so that's our A. So A is equal to I plus P, your interest, which is $1,040, plus your principal, how much you started with, which was 640. So that's equals to $1,680 is your total amount, how much money you would have at the end of your investment. And that's how simple interest is calculated. Okay, let's try another one. Let's keep trying. So find the simple interest in the amount. It's the same thing. This time our principal is equal to 1,500. Our rate is 6% per annum. Per annum means per year. Sometimes the financial world likes to use fancy words. So 6%, so that is equal to 0.06. The more that you do these questions, the more practice you'll get into converting percents into decimals. So if you need to use your calculator this time to just make sure, totally fine. If you're getting comfortable to just do it in your head, or if you need to do it over on the side, also totally fine. Do what works for you. And then time is equal to 18 months. So is it in years? Nope. So we need to convert it into years. So that means that it's 18 divided by 12, because 12 is the number of months per year. And so your T is going to be 1.5, because 18 divided by 12 is 1.5. So it's important. That's why it's also important to write down your variables, is that sometimes it helps you make sure that you're getting what you actually need. So then to calculate your interest, I equals PRT. So I don't know why my computer doesn't like me sometimes. Okay, so I equals principal, so 1,000, 1,500 times, try to remember to write the times in sometimes, 0.06 times 1.5. Now you could do this in parts. I just do it all together because we're not really working on multiplication skills. So I just do it all in one step on my calculator. If you wanted to do it in 2 steps, you could. But it just makes sense to do it all in one step on your calculator, because that's not really the skill that we're developing right now. So that means that 1,500 times 0.06 times 1.5 is equal to $135. So that is your interest. So then to figure out your total amount, so how much you have in total after the 18 months, is equal to your interest plus your principal. So your interest is 135 plus your principal, which was 1,500. So that means your total amount is $1,635 is how much money you would have after that 18 months. Okay. So we're going to continue. This time we're going to see, we're just keeping practicing. This is how we get comfortable, is by doing it over and over again. So principal, we're still finding the simple interest and the amount. Our principal is 480. Our rate is equal to 3.5% per annum per year, which is 0.035. And our time is equal to 75 weeks. So because it's weeks, that means we need to convert it to years. So 75 divided by 52. So there's 52 weeks in a year. I don't know that off the top of my head, so we're going to calculate it. So 75 divided by 52 is equal to 1.44 years. So 1.44 is what our time is going to be equal to. So to calculate our interest, our simple interest formula is I equals P R T. So principal is 480 times our interest rate is 0.035 times our number of years, which is 1.44. So then we use our calculator. Remember, I'm using the Desmos calculator so that you can see it. You don't have to use this calculator at all. You can use a calculator that you have or on your phone. Again, because you don't have any tests and your final assignment is an assignment, not an exam, it is totally okay to use your phone because everything's open book. So you don't have to have another calculator. You can just use your phone, and that is fine if that's what you have. So when we calculate that, 480 times 0.035 times 1.44, and that gives us $24.19. And so then to find our total amount, our amount is equal to interest, I, plus principal, P, is equal to $24.19 plus $480 is equal to $504.19. And this is where you can practice those strategies that we use at the beginning of our lesson, our brain activations, if you want to practice adding in your head. So for this one, I did 20 plus 80. I know that that's going to be 100, so I knew that it was going to be 500, and then I was just going to have $4.19 after that. So you can totally practice those, or you could use your calculator, and that is fine too. Okay, so that is that one. And then one more. So finding the simple interest. This one, we look to see what's different. We have days. So our principal is $3,210. Our rate is equal to 12.75%, which is 0.1275. This is also the time to catch mistakes. If you're making mistakes, if you write things out, then that sometimes helps you process what it is that you're actually looking at. Whereas if you just type it into your calculator, then if you make a mistake, then there's no record of that mistake. Whereas writing it out, then I can see and you can see where you made the mistake. And then our time is 200 days. So that is not in years, so we need to figure out how many years that is. The other really good thing to do as you're doing these sorts of things is to logically think. So is 200 days more than 1 year or less than 1 year? Well, 200 is less than 365, so that means that I know it's going to be 0 point something. It's not going to be 1 point something or 2 point something because it's not more than 1 year. So even though I don't know what that, I can still, when I use my calculator, to divide that, but I can just expect that it's going to be 0 point something. So 365. So then that is equal to 0.55. So that's just a really good thing to keep in check in terms of what is logical. And it can be a really great way to, if you're making a calculation error, if you miss pressing a button on your calculator, it's so easy to happen. Then if you were expecting it to be 0 point something and you get 8.2 or something, then you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. And you can go back and check again. It's really important to check as you're working and with your final answer if it makes any sense, because then you can catch yourself errors. And that's how it is in life, is that there isn't somebody coming behind you checking to make sure that everything that you're doing is calculated properly. You have to think logically, is what you're doing is making sense or not. Okay, so then how do we actually calculate our I equals PRT, our interest? So our principal is $3,210. Our rate is 0.1275, and our time is 0.55 years. So doing that on a calculator, we have 3,210 times 0.1275 times 0.55 is equal to $225.10. $225.10, is that what I said? Totally, my brain just blanked. Yes, okay. If you were to round differently when you did your number of years, your answer might be slightly different, depending on how you round. If you had used more decimal places, or if you used less decimal places, you might have got to a different answer. So with interest rates, 2 or 3 decimal places is probably okay for our purposes, but just know that you might get something that's slightly different. If you get something that's slightly different when you're handing work into me, I'll check it, but I'll still mark it correctly if it's slightly off from what I'm expecting based on rounding. You still have the right ideas. It's not necessarily a matter of getting the exact number that I get. But again, this is why showing your work is really important, because then I can understand what you're doing and where you rounded, and I don't have to guess what's going on. Because if you just give me a final answer and you haven't shown me any work, I have no idea how you got there. So I can't tell if it's a rounding error, or if it's just like you rounded differently, if it's a calculation error, if it's a completely conceptual error. So the more information you give me, the more I can understand, and then something that you might get the same answer as somebody else who doesn't give me any work. If you give me work, I might be able to figure out what it was where you went wrong, and you might not lose any marks because it's just a small thing that actually doesn't matter. But if you just give me the answer, you might not get any marks at all because I have no idea how you got that and if it's just randomly written down. So show your work. This is why teachers say over and over again, show your work, because you're explaining to me what you understand. Okay, so then to calculate the amount, A equals I plus P. So our interest is $225.10 plus our principal, which was $3,210. So to add that together, I know that I'm going to have 3,000. 200 plus 200 is 400. 25 plus 10 is 35, and then 10 cents, because there's no other cents. And that's how much we have in total at the end. Okay, so now you should be able to do the support questions on page 19, question number 3, where you're practicing doing all those simple interest calculations. Okay, so let's consolidate what we've learned today. So we have been talking about simple interest, which is lesson 7. So it is linear growth. It's a straight line. We're growing at the same amount. We didn't look at this exactly, but we know we'll look at this a little bit more in our next lesson. But our pattern is increasing, or it could be decreasing. We've just been talking about growth. We're not talking about borrowing, but anyway, it's the same idea at a constant rate. It's changing in the same amount each time. Like if you think back to the table that we did at the beginning, where we were adding 100 each time, that's constant. It didn't change. So I equals PRT is our formula, so you don't have to do the graph every time. You can just calculate the total amount, where I is your interest earned in dollars, P is your principal amount in dollars, R is your interest rate as a percent as a decimal, and T is your time in years. And then we also did your final amount in dollars is equal to your principal plus your interest, or your interest plus your principal. I did it the other way around, but it's all good. Okay, so your success criteria are: one, that you can use the formula I equals PRT to calculate simple interest. Hopefully, with some practice, you can do that. Two, you can explain the significance of constant growth to simple interest. So we didn't talk a ton about that. I should have put it in a graph and I forgot, but just showing that with simple interest, we are growing in a straight line. We're growing at a constant rate. And then three, you can explain the details of interest rates and time periods in terms of simple interest. So knowing that your interest rates have to be as a decimal, so being comfortable converting your percentages into decimals, and that your time has to be in years. So you have to know how many years or how many months, weeks, and days are equal to 1 year, and being able to convert your time period into years, depending on if you're using months, weeks, or days. Okay, so if you have any questions for me, I am here always to answer them. So please reach out and contact me. My number at the office is 807-737-1488, extension 2209. You can also call toll-free at 1-800-667-3703. You can use the extension there, which is also 2209. You can connect with me through email at bronwyn.slate, which is spelled BRONWYN.SLATE@nnec.on.ca. You can Facebook me at bslatewahsa, or watch the replay of this lesson on YouTube, which is also called bslate Wahsa. My office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., so feel free to reach out to me during those times if you need help. I hope this lesson made a lot of sense. It's really important as we're moving forward that you understand simple interest before we move on to the more complicated stuff. So definitely spend some time with this lesson. If it doesn't make a lot of sense, go over it a few times and ask for help if it doesn't make sense, so that we can, when we move on to the next thing, which is more complicated, that isn't as necessarily as confusing if you understand what we're doing in simple interest. Thanks so much for joining me. Miigwech.